Hi friends, this is Angelica. Thanks so much for joining me here on Scrapbook.com's YouTube channel. Today I'm going to be sharing how I put these 3 cards together using all Scrapbook.com exclusive products. The first 2 die sets we're going to be using is Bold Curves A2 die plate and this fun 26-piece Market Blooms floral die set. Both of these dies have illustrations on the back of the packaging so you can see what the dies do. And then I've also picked out a rainbow of Concord and Ninth cardstock for the flowers and backgrounds. We're going to start with the backgrounds, and I'm going to die cut one background on screen, and this is Oceanside cardstock that I'm working with. The cover plates are an exact A2 card size, so my panel is also A2 size. So I did make sure that I had the die and the paper lined up correctly, so I would get a good A2 size die cut. And here you can see that the die does die cut 6 curves. So I die cut 5 more papers off screen, and now I am going to pull a wave out of each pile so I can make a really pretty, bright and cheerful rainbow background. I'm using artiste glue to glue the wavy curves onto a card panel versus onto a card base. You could glue these onto a card base. I like to work with a panel because I'm probably not going to glue these on straight, and I did not. So gluing it on a panel just makes it easier to trim the edges to make it look nice and clean instead of trying to cut through a card base. This white panel I'm working with is Neenah Solar White 80-pound cardstock. And then, like I mentioned before, I'm using Concord and Ninth cardstock colors, which are Oceanside, Sea Glass, Buttercup, Marmalade, Poppy, and Pink Lemonade. This panel is now done, so we're going to make a second panel, and we're going to use the waves in a different way. I pulled a strip out of Marmalade, Buttercup, and Sea Glass for this panel. I'm only using these 3 waves, and I'm making sure I leave a little bit of white space in between each wave for a different look than the first panel. I did make 5 panels in all with all of these waves. I had a couple left over, a couple edges left over, which was totally fine. But for the most part, I was able to make a lot of panels out of the 6 that I'd cut. Now we're going to move on to Market Bloom Florals die sets, and I pulled out a whole bunch of paper scraps from my Concord and Ninth stash. I used dragon fruit and pink lemonade and buttercup for the flowers, and then sprout and parsley for the leaves. I did mostly use the back of the packaging to put my flowers together. I just followed the illustrations that are on the back of the packaging. I mean, these flowers are pretty easy to put together. There's centers for most of the flowers. There are a couple layering flowers and leaves like what I'm doing right now. You can put adhesive on the back, double-sided adhesive on the back of your paper before you die cut, or you can use glue. I just used glue and tapped off glue onto my craft sheet before attaching it to the background. That way it just saves on a lot of glue coming out because these pieces are really intricate. So it's really hard to put just the tiniest little bit of glue on the back of the die cut. So it's just easier to tap off the excess glue and attach them. Now I'm going to get my assembly line ready. These are all the flowers put together. I have my card panels, and then I did die cut sentiments off screen. I used thank you sentiments, set 3 from Scrapbook.com to make these sentiments. I did die cut a few more flowers and petals off screen, so I had a large selection to choose from when I'm putting the cards together. I have all of the die cut pieces separated in stack and sort trays, and I'm using Scrapbook.com's 1mm foam adhesive to add the words to my card fronts. I love how thin this foam adhesive is, but it does give just the tiniest dimension, so I'm going to be able to tuck the flowers behind or under the die cut words. This was probably the longest part of putting these cards together, just because I do take my time figuring out how I want to arrange my words, how I wanted to arrange the flowers. So when I do cards like this, when I'm doing a large arrangement on my card panels or on my card base, I like to set up the layout first. I take a picture with my phone, so I have that as a reference, and then I'll put the card together. So I do have my phone off screen right next to me because I have played around with a couple different layouts, and I'm going to do the final layouts on screen. I will move the flowers around a little bit, and then I'm going to use glue. I'm just going to put little bits of glue behind each flower. I'll pull them back and just a drop of glue and then push the flowers into place. The tools that I'm using to make this part of putting the cards together a little easier on myself, I have reverse tweezers, which I use making every card. I couldn't imagine crafting without them. So my reverse tweezers, and then I also have a small pair of scissors to help me. I'll trim the stems down, the longer stems down, so they're easier to tuck in under the flowers. Because of the foam adhesive that's behind the words, I do have to be careful with the length of the stems and of the flowers. So I do trim a few stems, and I think I trimmed 1 or 2 petals too, just to make sure that they fit nicely under the words. On some of the bigger flowers, I did cut small pieces off of the foam adhesive roll to tuck in under the flowers, just to give the flowers a little bit more support. And this foam adhesive is really easy to cut through. It's not a really aggressive adhesive. It's not really sticky. So it's not going to leave adhesive on your scissors. And if it does leave adhesive, it's just the smallest amount and really easy to take off. And even though the foam adhesive isn't aggressive with the adhesive, it still has a really good grip. So once you have your pieces in place, I don't really push down until I know this is going to be the final spot for the words or for the flowers. Then I will push hard on the adhesive, make sure it's super bonded onto the card panel. And now I know that the pieces are not going to go anywhere. But I just love that the foam adhesive can just sit on the panel without being stuck on it, and then I have to pull it off, and I'm hurting the panel, and I'm bending the die cuts, and so I really do appreciate that about this foam adhesive. The last thing we need to do to finish these cards is get the panels onto card bases. So this is how I put panels on all of my cards. I use double-sided adhesive. This is the 1/4 inch Scrapbook.com adhesive. I add strips on all 4 sides of the panel and then a strip in the center. I expose the center and I line up the left top corner of the panel with the card base before I bond the panel and card base together. And then I'll use my reverse tweezers to take the backing off the rest of the adhesive and then firmly push that down onto the card base. If the panel is smaller, then I do put a little bit of glue on the center adhesive before I put it on my card base. That way I can wiggle the panel around just a little bit to make sure it's straight and centered. So that finishes these cards in this video. If you'd like to see more ideas on how to use these products, be sure to check out Scrapbook.com's gallery. There'll be a link to the gallery down below in the description box, as well as links to the products I used and links to my blog and YouTube channel. I want to thank you again for joining me today. Take care, friends.